Market News.
I am the Executive Director of the Oklahoma City Housing Authority, and the Housing Authority also has a nonprofit called the Community Enhancement Corporation, and I'm the CEO of that organization. We are the entity in Oklahoma City that is responsible for providing public housing and Section 8 housing only in the city limits of Oklahoma City. We are confined by law to the city limits. And so in Oklahoma City, we have 4,300 Section 8 vouchers that are possible, and we'll talk more about how those numbers really work. And then we have right at 2,900 public housing units in Oklahoma City as well. So we say we serve 15,000 citizens of Oklahoma City each and every day.
Now, the current population in Oklahoma City is much greater than that. So you figure what percentage of the population uses your program?
I've never done that.
Okay. Well, I think the last population was something like, 600,000 for Oklahoma City? I know we're somewhere near that. First off, you guys have been since 1970s, I think, is the program start?
So in 1965 we started.
Okay. And that was written by a federal program, or you guys state program, or both?
So yes, the answer is yes, and you can throw the city in there if you want to. So created by federal law, back in the 30s to establish worker housing in the United States. And then the states grabbed that in the 60s across the nation. And then the states give each individual city the opportunity to choose how their housing authority looks. And so the Oklahoma City Council passed an ordinance, said the Public Housing Authority would be a separate entity from the city government, but the mayor of Oklahoma City appoints all of our board of commissioners who hire and fire the executive director of the organization. So we're related to each of them, but we are a distant stepchild from each of them as well.
So walk me through kind of the typical process for a tenant or even a home buyer to go through a public housing program.
So sure. So you have to do them differently. Public housing, and we really don't have any home ownership programs. Our program is almost 100% rent. There is a small program that allows you to buy a home under the Section 8 program, but we're not active in that. So public housing, an individual must be low income, and that's pretty much below the income of $40,000 for the traditional family. They apply for public housing, and you can do that online at our website, www.oceanet.org, and then there's a link to apply for public housing. So you fill out that application. You basically choose which of the 15 different locations you would like to live at, and you can select multiple ones. And then the paperwork begins that process. And after you prove your income level, after you approve other things, your family size, and those kind of things, and kind of exhibit a former rental history, then we'll schedule a walkthrough of an apartment with you that you would like to live in, and then you can become a public housing renter. I said there's 15 different sites, so each of those sites has its different wait lists. So we have wait lists that are a month, 2 months long, all the way up to several years long. So there is a tremendous wait list in public housing. So Section 8, so let's talk about the difference between public housing and Section 8 just for a second. Public housing is owned by the Oklahoma City Housing Authority and the federal government. So all of those 2,900 units, the Oklahoma City Housing Authority owns. So Section 8 is typically owned by a private individual or a private company. It is not owned by the government entity. And so in Section 8, a housing authority, or in Oklahoma City also the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, is provided vouchers from the federal government through the Section 8 allocation program from HUD. So we get $2 million a month to provide Section 8 vouchers. And so we utilize that amount of money to get as many vouchers out on the street as we can. So an individual applies for Section 8, also online, also at the same website, and you apply for Section 8. The difference in that scenario is after you've proven your income, after you've proven your family status, all of those types of things, then you've got to go out and find your apartment that you want. And renters typically are able to, call the management company or call the homeowner that owns the house that's going to be rented and ask, do you take Section 8? And if they do, then staff from the housing authority will go to that unit to inspect it for quality standards to ensure that that home is safe and viable for a family to live there. And if all of that works out between the housing authority inspection, the tenant wanting to move in, the landlord wanting to accept, and there's an agreed upon negotiated rent that meets fair market rent and meets a payment standard established by the local housing authority, then the contract for renting that unit can be signed.
How long does that process typically take from start to finish?
So right now in Oklahoma City, we do have a wait list for those persons that want to apply for Section 8. It's not a tremendously long wait list because we just went through and reevaluated all of those folks that are on the wait list to try to get as much voucher activity as we could. So it's not a tremendously long wait list right now, but it probably takes a good month for that whole process to take place after you hit the top of the wait list.
You're talking, at the beginning of this, you said there was about 4,300 total vouchers. And those vouchers, how many of them are actively being used right now? Like, are we at 4,300 are actually being paid out to landlords in Oklahoma City? So
there's one of the confusing things about Section 8. You've got to talk about money versus voucher. And so we get $2 million-ish a month. Divided by 4,300 is a little less than $500. We know in Oklahoma City rents are getting large. It costs a lot of money to rent in Oklahoma City. You can't rent a lot of quality housing for $500 a month. So, no, we can't use all 4,300 vouchers. So then you take the Section 8 scenario and you divide that into money. And so let's say we have about $550 a month for the average payment standard for a voucher in Oklahoma City. Some of those standards are $10 a month. Some of those are close to $1,000 a month. But you divide that out and you get right at $5,500. And so you take 5,500 times however many you can. Maybe that's about 3,900. Maybe that's about 4,000. You play that number each and every month. And so right now we're about at a 90 to a 91 utilization rate on vouchers. And that's percent, 90 or 91%.
Of the 4,300 allowed. Wow.
Yeah.
And so, what was it? Now, that's been over the last 5 years, we've seen the largest reduction. And that's just because of rising rent. Can you talk about that for a second? So
that's been a major factor in Section 8 in Oklahoma City. Rents have gone through the roof in the last decade. We know that we are rising at a faster percentage than some of the major markets in the nation. Seattle, San Francisco, Oakland, on the East Coast, Indianapolis, New York City. We know that we are rising at a faster rate for a rent than those cities are. And we think those are the most outlandish places to rent, the stereotype of renting in the United States. So our rent has just gone through the roof. So if you would have had this interview 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we were at 100% of voucher utilization. We were only at about $500 because we could rent a quality home for $500. But the changing market conditions in Oklahoma City that have driven rent, $1,200 is an easy one-bedroom rent now in Oklahoma City. We just can't pay that with Section 8.
And that's a problem which has no apparent answer right now. I mean, we're looking at rent control as one option that people have brought up. I'm not sure if that's worked really well in Seattle. I think there's some other side effects to doing stuff like that exists when you try to control the market. What are some things you guys are discussing to help alleviate that problem? I mean, we all want just higher wages. Can we start with that? Or
So no, I mean, that's not the answer. Paying people more money is not the answer because the economy can't change that dramatically of rent for 10,000 people. So what do you do? So in Oklahoma City recently, the city has just said that we want to address a homelessness situation by offering $50 million over the next 8 years for MAPS, and that proposal passed, and the Housing Authority is one of the major partners in that section of MAPS. And so how does that help? Well, that will allow us to build at least another 1,000 units of affordable housing in Oklahoma City. We do divide that out between supportive housing with case management and then workforce housing, which is that housing at that level right above the affordability, but typically right below the true market housing in the city. So somewhere between that $500 and that $1,000 rental market. So you can't just say to investor, go build that level of housing. You can't say to investor, go build 500 more units of supportive housing and 500 more units of workforce housing. You've got to have financial assistance to construct that. And so the MAPS proposal had the $50 million that will build those 1,000 new units, and we can leverage that with tax credits and other funding sources to help us get to an amount of money, somewhere around $400 million leveraged over 8 years, that will allow us to build additional housing that doesn't have that construction loan thrown on top of it. So we, as the landlords, can maintain that rent at that $500 to $600 level, so that we can add affordable housing to this market and have some of it specialized, but then open up the other housing that formerly housed the folk that need case management to provide additional housing in Oklahoma City. So that's how we can begin to address this model, is to construct housing that is the construction is paid for.
Now, building materials have been changing rapidly. I mean, we've got a lot of ideas. We have a company out of Austin we featured last week on the show that's printing a house with a 3D printer.
Oh, cool.
They printed a 400 square foot house for about $10,000, okay, start to finish. the house received building permits from Austin, which is one of the toughest building permit city in the United States. So very exciting to see kind of the technology increasing. So I think what I'm hearing you say is over the next 10 years, you're looking to partner with investors and contractors, general contractors that want to build and develop affordable housing. And you guys will work hand in hand with them to help make that building process incentivized for them to actually build cheaper and then also be able to keep the rent down at the end. I think most of our discussions with investors, at least in this show and in this market, and really in the nation, and really any nation that's got a capitalist market, is when we build a property, right, we're trying to maximize the amount of rent we can get out of it, right?
Sure.
That's the goal, right?
Sure.
How high can we rent this for? What you're talking about is to do the opposite, is to build a property and think, how cheap can we rent this for and still stay profitable? Those two things seem to be at odds with one another, and I think that's the power of where government comes in and says, well, we're going to incentivize investors. So what does that look like? I mean, let's get, for those that may be going, this is me, I'm ready, I've been looking for a multi-unit construction project in a town that needs me. What does that look like for that person? How do they get involved in that?
So we are building new stuff now, renovating stuff now, using developers that are interested in affordable housing, both local and nationwide developers. I think you have to have a passion for affordable housing. You have to do things like think outside the box and print a 3D home. And I don't want your listeners to think that we're saying we're going to cut costs, because we're not. I mean, marble countertops, high quality wood flooring. It's not a slumlord kind of a house. It's a house that we want all people to feel like they would be proud to live in it. Our goal is not to build an apartment community that you can drive by and say, oh, that's affordable housing. We want to build apartment communities that you drive by and you say, wow, that would be a great place to live. That's our new goal. The stereotype of public housing in America is, Cabrini Green in Chicago, right. Tall, just a set of windows and concrete bunkers that don't look great. Well, we don't want that model. We want to transition our housing to a model that looks like a traditional market rate unit, and we believe that we can get there. 36th and Lottie to Kelly on the south side of the street is a project called Sooner Haven. Sooner Haven was built back in the early 70s. For a long time looked like a traditional public housing stereotype. And so we're totally renovating that program, taking the property from public housing and moving it to Section 8 through a program called the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program that HUD created to transition properties to a Section 8 model so that we could borrow money because the Public Housing Authority cannot borrow money against its public housing. So you have to transition it to a private model. And I told you we have a nonprofit corporation called the Community Enhancement Corporation. We transitioned it to that so that we can begin that process.
Of leveraging the assets you already got.
Leveraging the assets.
Okay.
It's what it's all about.
Right. And the banks are probably happy to do that. I mean,
the banks are really
sure.
happy to do that. I mean, you have a organization that's been around since '65, and very capable of managing and directing a contractual program and a rental program. And so we've also just built on the north side of town at 122nd and Western an affordable assisted living facility called the John H. Johnson Care Suites. And that Care Suites, it will be a truly affordable assisted living program where an individual can have a Section 8 voucher to pay their rent. and then have Medicaid and Medicare to pay for their medical needs, their assisted living needs, and then use their supplemental Social Security income to pay for their meals. And so basically an individual can get full assisted living care at the John H. Johnson Care Suites for no out-of-pocket cost on their own.
Wow.
So just a tremendous way to begin to think outside the box in a way to utilize your housing authority, to utilize tax credits, and to utilizing the debt refinancing to build affordable properties in Oklahoma City that mirror market rate properties, just as nice, just as great, and make that opportunity available to folk. So I think what we're trying to do is to change our model to be a model that is a part of the community instead of a model that stands away from the community.
Now, once someone's living in a home that's very similar to what you say, the community or the market, is the idea then that it's very easy for them to transition out of the program? I mean, is that the push, is to get people out of the program? We don't want people on, social care for the long haul. I mean, that's not the point, right?
So that is not the point, but that typically is what is more common. The rent is based entirely on your income. It's 30% of your adjusted income. So I always tell folk, a couple years ago, the 1040 form that we all fill out, the bottom of the first page is basically your adjusted income. It's not perfect, but it's close. And so you would take 30% of that, and that's the amount of money that you should expect to pay for rent. I think a lot of us in Oklahoma City pay a lot more than that for rent, but that's the model that we try to look for. And so 30% of your adjusted rent. Well, if you get a better job or you get a raise, you know that your adjusted rent goes up. So you're going to pay a larger portion of your rent. So every time you get a job, you're required to tell the Public Housing Authority that your income has changed. At least once a year, we go back and look at everyone's income to ensure that we are charging the appropriate amount of rent, that 30%. And so if your income keeps going up, you keep getting promoted at your job, maybe you find it a second job that you want to have, then your rent goes up. So that is designed to statistically move you towards paying market rent. And so maybe you started paying $100 a month. The next year you're paying $200, $300, then $400, then $500. And finally you're at that level where you're paying for 100% of your voucher costs. I told you about $550. And so when you hit that level, then yeah, you're paying more than your voucher is really worth to you to rent from that particular landlord. So that's the way you transition out. It works in public housing the same way. That's a big income jump still in Oklahoma City. Sure. And so it takes a while for that process to move along. Some of us lose our jobs. Some of us maybe have a change in family situation that we need to be at home again. And so it's a much more difficult process than the stereotype of, well, you'll get a better job and you'll move out in a couple of years. It just doesn't work that way. But that is certainly the goal, to help individuals learn how to pay more for their rent, to help them become more self-sufficient so they're not relying on government assistance.
Well, and I think there's probably a couple of ways, but the only way I can really think about a program like that really working in a free market is, the incentive is not like, oh great, I get to pay more and the government's going to pay less, right? Yeah. But if we think of it in terms of, I get to allow more people to use this program instead of me using this program, I think that's really the ticket there, is really instilling a desire in the program to help other people, right? If I can get off my voucher, that means this single family or this single mother here that's struggling on the street in a terrible housing can get an opportunity to then get a voucher that wouldn't before.
And that's the goal. But in Oklahoma City, there are so many folk that need affordable housing that that will always use, or for the foreseeable future, will always use 100% of that voucher cost.
We've got Ben Carson now in HUD. Has he increased or decreased, or has it stayed the same with the new leadership?
So it takes a long time for a major cabinet position to make huge changes in the basic functions of affordable housing or any program. It's been 30% of your adjusted rent for years. It's been public housing in Section 8 for years. The Trump administration has every year recommended to zero out the capital fund, meaning that there would be no more funds for capital improvements to any housing, and they've dramatically cut the public housing funding as well. Congress has not agreed with the president's budget, so each year they have come back and funded a capital fund program and also funded public housing at an appropriate level. Every public housing authority would like to get more money, so I won't say they fully fund it, but they fund it at a more appropriate level that is not in line at all with the president's budget. But Section 8 is something that does have a lot of funding support, and so that's why we're beginning the process of transitioning away from public housing, moving towards that Section 8 model, which is more stable in history. And so that's one of the reasons we're doing it. We're also doing it so that we can borrow against our portfolio using that leverage of debt to help improve our properties. And that's an encouraging move from HUD nationwide for housing authorities to transition that way.
So you think that in the next 10 years we'll see an increase in Section 8 vouchers and a decrease in actual physical public housing?
So what we talked about, it takes a special individual, it takes a special company that wants to invest in affordable housing. It's not your traditional market rate apartment or home builder. There's not a lot of incentive for the individual to do that. It takes incentives from the government or private sources to build that affordable housing. In Oklahoma City right now, there's just not a lot of folk wanting to build that affordable housing because that rent variable is so large.
Right.
And so it takes an organization like the Housing Authorities Development Organization to build that, or it takes partnerships with nationwide affordable housing builders that want to come to Oklahoma City and build an affordable housing model.
And when you're talking about, when we say affordable housing, sounds to me like we're saying $500 for a one-bedroom unit.
Yep.
Okay. And what about a two-bedroom unit?
So I mean, if you're at $800 for maybe a market rate unit, and then you're at $500. So it's that same kind of a scenario. You're less. You're not at half, but maybe you're at 60-ish, 70-ish% of the value for the affordable unit versus the market rate unit. So it goes up proportionally like that. it's
I mean, you mentioned that the original vouchers at the beginning were based off of a formula that HUD had put together. And I can only imagine that that's based off of the median income for the region.
It is.
Right? So our median income is what, $52,000, I think, for a family in Oklahoma City. So typically when we advise investors to purchase, we say don't really get above 3 times the median income for your purchase, your acquisition price, which puts us at a cap at about $150,000. Now, any builders that are listening to this are going, there's no way I can build a home for $150,000. So that's really where we've run into an issue, and that just leaves us with builders can't build affordable housing anymore. And so now that puts pressure on existing dwellings, right? And then existing dwellings aren't being built anymore, and there's higher demand, so supply and demand makes those go up. So now we're in an issue. So what we're asking, I think, is for someone to come up with a way to build a house that's $150,000 or less. And usually we get away with that with multifamily housing, right? We've got one roof, right? One plumbing system, one electrician that goes there, and it's all on one property, but it's got multiple families living in that. So that's where it makes sense. And then we can go up in height and all this stuff. But there's a lot of issues with density then. We've got a bunch of people living in one area. So it sounds like what you're saying is as of right now, if no technology changes, if we have no changes in current infrastructure, we're going to be reaching out in the next 5 to 10 years for a group to come in and build public housing in Oklahoma City to help increase from 3,100 units to potentially 5,000 units. Wow. Okay, that's a huge increase for you guys. And then you're going to do that through leveraging the existing infrastructure you have.
Right. And so let's not use the word public housing. Let's use the word affordable housing.
Meaning that public housing would be government built. Affordable housing would be community built.
We'll have no more public housing built in Oklahoma City. I say that probably pretty sure, 90% sure. None of it will be public housing in the end. In a decade.
All 3,100 now are classified as public housing. We're going to leverage the public housing into community housing or affordable housing built by organizations.
Right.
Gotcha.
And so some of those structures will stay the same and they'll just change, and some of those structures will be built new. And so how do you do that? I mean, how do you incentivize? And so the voters in Oklahoma City have given our community, our city, an amazing opportunity to increase the number of affordable units in our community, in our city, and said yes to a vote that said $50 million to address homelessness. Homelessness means giving a house. It's hard to address homelessness if you don't give a house, and so that's the capital way to increase the number of units through leveraging that $50 million through real estate, through tax credits, through bonds, other methods, in order to fully change what affordable housing looks like in Oklahoma City. And then all of those together, the affordable housing, the market rate housing, that will provide this city, this community, with a new level of housing that I think we can all be proud of.
Well, it's definitely, we've got quite the problem that we're trying to solve here. And it's a multifaceted problem. I think it's an economic problem as much as it is a social problem, right? I think when we hear of this universal base income, Andrew Yang and some of the other political candidates pushing for it, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla pushing for a universal basic income, Facebook pushing for a universal basic income, something to the tune of $1,000 a month to every citizen in the United States. Those are questions, and they come in and they say the point of it is oh well, if you had $1,000 a month, right, you could try new things. Because right now, I don't have time to try another thing because I've got to work, I got to provide for a family. But if I had this income, I could then try new ideas and we could come out with new technology. Well, the question is wasn't that the role of the American family in the past, right? If you've genuinely had an idea, for example, if I have a 5-year-old, but when he gets to an age and he says, Dad, I'd really like to try this new idea. I really think it's going to work. It could really change this, but it's not going to pay much. I may need some help. Of course, son. Come live with Mom and Dad for a little bit. Sure, we'd love to have you here. Those are the kind of things that I think the America of the past was built on, right? We were more of a family-oriented society. And now that we've moved into the millennial generation of being, every man for himself, and we all have our own big screen TVs, we have our own, little pods, and we all live separately, I think that's what's really brought in this new question of how do we afford everyone being on their own, no one leaning on each other, no community-based. Even when I was growing up, just even in the 80s and 90s, the church played a huge role in homeless outreach. I mean, it was not uncommon to have almost every church you went into having a homeless breakfast or a homeless meal or blankets given, or drives. And now you don't see that often.
Right.
So I think that there's many answers to this, but I would say technology has got to increase.
Oh, sure.
We're still building the same way we were building 100 years ago.
Right.
Very little changes. Yeah, sure, we've got some insulation and some things changed, but wood and nails, come on, we're still there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see these companies like Icon 3D, Larry Haynes, Sun Economy. He's got a machine that's patented now. It'll be interesting to see what that plays into the affordable index. Also the zoning, city planning, coming up with these new ideas.
Right.
And I think that's where you're going to see some incentivization is when the legislators come in and they say, you know what, this zoning law is not going to apply to everyone. You've got to demonstrate that this is for the good of the people,
Right.
and having some politicians with some backbones, right? Because the temptation is we can change zoning and density, and we've got investors that are venture capitalists coming back behind them, going, let's fund these high density structures, and then they're supposed to be affordable housing. We've seen that play out in Seattle and all these different cities. And then they're not affordable housing. They just add to the problem. So, thanks for.
And I think the city has done an amazing job at trying to begin to understand affordable housing, what we want to do in Oklahoma City. Right now, they're going through a major study to talk about affordable housing and what does that really look like. Having consultants come in and help strategize through that. It's a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous change in our community to begin to look at the social issues of housing and care for those folks that need supportive housing, and working together to begin to address those. I'm really encouraged by that. Sure, that might mean more density issues are important, but really the issue is providing affordable housing to our citizens and providing them the care they need to live in that affordable housing and maybe even become self-sufficient. I think that's the role of the Housing Authority, and I hope a role that now with MAPS we can totally transition our strategic model and be a viable entity for the next 5 decades like we've been already.
That's great stuff. Well, we're almost out of time here, but I want to end with a very important question. We've talked about this, enormous raise in rents and at rates faster than Seattle. I mean, some of these markets that are on the news is saying, look at this, and we're actually surpassing those. Economists, you use math, right? It's only, you can't just exponentially grow, right? So at some point, it will find its median, right? And it will not be able to grow beyond. What do you think's causing it to grow so fast? And when do you think it's kind of teetering here? Have we seen some kind of tapering off going on?
So why is it growing so high? I think Oklahoma City is a great place to live. And I think nationwide they've finally begun to reach that market that it's a nice place to live, great climate, good schools, good jobs, good churches, good fellowship, and I think that's what people want. That's the kind of lifestyle we want. And that means we need more housing. And so we had to build housing pretty quick. And so the rents went up. And will the rents stop? Well, I hope so. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as our city understands that all levels of income deserve a place to live. And I feel like with MAPS and the city council and the mayor's office, the city manager's office, the planning department, I feel like all of us are now working together to ensure that we develop those models where all folk can live in an appropriate, nice, affordable home to themselves.
Mark, this has been a great talk. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
For more information and to listen or watch online, visit OKCRealEstateShow.com.